In the years leading up to the Civil War, numerous plantations and slave markets were struck by violent assaults carried out by an enigmatic figure called the Abolitionist's Hound. The first attack involved the brutal killing of an elderly woman and her grown son. Authorities found their bodies inside a mansion, along with several other victims whose identities were impossible to determine due to the advanced state of decay. Alongside them were the remains of various animals, wolves, pumas, and vultures among them. This wave of violence continued for 8 long years, with the final act being a massacre at a slave auction in Savannah. Witnesses described the attacker as a monstrous being with the body of a demon, accompanied by a young girl. Some of those who were being sold at the auction perished during the attack. Strangely enough, reports claimed that the girl revived them. However, these miraculous acts did not extend to either the buyers or the sellers. Given the unusual details about the killer and the alleged resurrections, the Agency of Helping Hands, AHH, took it upon themselves to investigate. They reached out to the individuals who had supposedly been brought back to life. Most of them remained silent, but one individual spoke up, insisting that the so-called demon was no demon at all. Instead, he called it an avenging angel, and the girl, he claimed, was a miracle worker who must not be harmed. He then demanded proof that the AHH was not affiliated with the Confederacy, which the agency provided. They assured him that their mission was to protect both the living and the dead, and with that, he revealed what he knew. The pair was located soon after, but the agents were taken aback when they saw the angel. He wasn't human. The creature had 6 large wings, resembling those of vultures or condors. His body was mostly human, but his head had been grotesquely altered and fused with the snout of a wolf. His arms had been replaced by the legs of a bear. Despite his terrifying appearance, the creature was completely calm. The girl with him was warm and welcoming. She introduced herself as Sena and explained that the chimera's name was Arrah, her brother. When asked about the massacre, Sena simply said, "They were just slavers. That's what we do to slavers." The agents offered her safety if she agreed to come with them. She was initially worried about Arrah's well-being, but after being reassured that he would be treated with care, she agreed to join the agency. There are 2 key things that make Sena particularly interesting to the agency. The first is her voice. It has a soothing quality, almost hypnotic, and she can sing anyone to sleep. Her favorite song to sing is a hymn called, "What Wondrous Love Is This?" The second and more remarkable trait is that Sena's blood has incredible healing powers. It can cure physical illnesses, reverse the effects of aging, and, in many cases, even bring people back to life, usually within a few hours of death, depending on how much the body has decayed. However, there are limitations. Her blood cannot undo decomposition or repair damage to someone who has already died. Additionally, the effects of her blood are not permanent unless it's for Arrah. For all other patients, continuous treatment is required. Sena appears to be stuck in a child's body, though her cognitive abilities fluctuate. She sometimes shows signs of dementia, regressing into a state akin to infancy, only to later regain her mental faculties and develop like a typical child or adolescent. At present, her cognitive abilities are consistent with those of a 14 to 16-year-old. It's important to note that drawing too much of her blood accelerates this cognitive decline, but it doesn't affect the regenerative properties of her blood. With her consent, Sena regularly donates blood for use by both agency personnel and inmates. It's also used by a small, specialized pharmaceutical company, which has become one of the agency's most lucrative sources of income. It's worth mentioning that Arrah, while initially seen as a liability, was later considered a dangerous individual. Despite initial attempts to eliminate him between the 1870s and 1980s, the current director, Eric W., put an end to all such plans and designed a special containment area for him, much like the one used for Inmate 1, Ward 1, Numa. Sena, a black girl who appears to be around 10 or 12 years old, has been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, dyslexia, and anemia. To support her treatment, Sena resides in a secure suite located in the agency's basement. The following interview is the first time Sena has shared details about her past. It's worth mentioning that, after conducting the interview, I tried to resign from my position. Shortly afterward, one of the agency's research subjects, Subject 58, Birdie, broke containment and tried to take control of my mind, which was easily the most terrifying experience of my life. Though the subject's attempts failed, it continues to haunt me, and I have no idea how to stop it. Strangely enough, the administration is blaming me for all of this. Despite the strong objections from both my assistant and the director, I've been confined to my quarters while awaiting disciplinary review. On the day I revived the dead man, Arrah and I had been on the run for 6 months. We lived deep in the forest, far from the slave catchers who dared not follow us there. They thought the forest was cursed, but in a way they were right. There was that creature in the tree struck by lightning, whispering, "Give me your eyes, and I'll show you things you never imagined if you let me get too close." Then there were the demons with necks that stretched on, never stopping. There was the witch who, at times, would tell you your future, and other times, she'd feed you to her cannibal son. And her son, well, he was the worst. He hunted men like they were rabbits, tore them apart, and then put them back together in twisted, horrifying ways before devouring them. And then there was me, an abomination who defied death. But I didn't feel like an abomination. I could bring little birds back to life just by pricking my fingertips. The foreman's cat, too, revived when I sliced my palm open. Even my cousin, who died of pneumonia while I sat beside him, came back when I cut my elbow. I thought no one would ever find out about him, but Arrah did. It was the only time he ever hit me. Then, after, he hit himself for doing it. You can't do that, Sena. Not with people. If they find out, they'll kill you or worse. They wouldn't kill me for helping, I told him. Oh yes, they would. You're just a slave. If I'd stuck to bringing birds, cats, and cousins back to life, no one would have known about what I was. But then the owner's youngest baby died. Arrah and I were told to help prepare for the wake. Arrah because he was the best at cleaning, and me because they thought I'd learn from him. It was heartbreaking, being in that room with the dead infant. I was so distracted that I accidentally cut my hand. Sometimes I wonder how different my life would have turned out if I hadn't made that mistake. As Arrah ran off to find a bandage, I cried over the little baby. He looked so strange in death, so tiny, and so empty, with one eye barely open, glimmering in a strange, milky way. Eyes aren't supposed to glisten like that. Babies shouldn't be empty. I touched the baby and said a prayer, not realizing I had smeared blood on him just as his grieving mother walked in. She slapped me so hard that everything went black for a second, only to return in a bright, dizzying blur. My head was spinning, and then I heard a baby crying. His mother made this gut-wrenching sound, almost like she was choking, before she reached into the tiny casket and pulled out her baby. He was wriggling, no longer empty, but full of life and light. And the way she held him, oh, the way she held him. I slipped away as people started to gather. I was invisible, just a little thing, not even worthy, not even unworthy, just not there, just a slave. But the news about the baby and his miracle-working slave girl spread fast. The entire plantation was soon searching for me. I don't know what they planned to do with me. I never found out because that night, Arrah took me and ran. We've been living in the forest ever since. The forest was the worst thing to ever happen to Arrah. He had never been well, but the forest, with all its monsters and magic, made him even worse. The night before I brought the dead man back to life, Arrah cried for hours. He kept saying his face was growing a second skin, made of tree bark. It's going to cover me, and I won't be able to move or keep you safe. It hurts. I asked him why it hurt. How could it hurt when there was no bark on him? When his skin was as smooth and clear as it had always been? His answer shook me to my core. Because I'm crazy. Eventually he fell asleep, but only after I sang to him. Singing was the only thing that ever calmed him down. Especially his favorite hymn, "What Wondrous Love Is This." Couldn't sleep. All I could think about was crying. I knew if I started, it would wake Arrah. He always woke up whenever I cried. So, as soon as the sun started to rise, I went for a walk. It was such a beautiful morning. Everything glowing gold and copper, bright like fire. About 10 minutes into my walk, I saw a little brown dog in the trees. He growled and lunged forward, but his legs were weak. One collapsed, and the others tangled up, sending him sprawling. That didn't stop him. He charged again. I lost my balance, and the dog went wild, biting at my hands until they bled. I crawled away, wishing I could kick him but not wanting to hurt him. My hands sank into something damp and furry. I looked down and saw a clump of dirty, matted hair shining in the sunlight. Beneath it was a crushed-in head, leaking old blood. My own blood, mixing with his, dripped into the mess. It was a body. A dead man, no legs, only one arm. The little dog kept yelping, tearing at my clothes, slamming into my knees as my blood dripped into the corpse's gaping mouth. Suddenly, the body jerked upward, gasping. Its bloody teeth glinted in the light, and its hollow eyes looked so sad, so scared. The dog wriggled forward, excited, and began licking the ruined face, while the body sucked in a broken breath, croaking something I could barely understand.
"I'm sorry," he whispered.
"I don't understand." The body lurched again, gasping for air, and with a ragged breath, it managed to croak, "My dog. He's here. I'll take care of him," I promised. Its insides bulged, glistening, and I could see the words trying to form. "Help!" I placed my hand on the man's forehead. It was soft, sticky, and too hot. "I'll get help." No, the sad eyes, dim like dying stars, flickered toward the left, toward a flat rock in the grass. "Help!" Just then, a shadow loomed over us. The little dog went wild, snarling as I looked up. It was Arrah. He yanked me away, and I gagged as my hand slid off the corpse's soft forehead, dragging strings of rotten, translucent flesh behind it. Arrah picked up the rock. The corpse rasped again. "Thank!" Arrah brought the rock down hard while I screamed, and the dog howled in terror. The body fell still. "How did your blood get on him?" Arrah asked, his voice cold. I didn't want to rat out the dog. "I hurt myself," I muttered. Arrah grabbed me roughly, and before I knew it, I was holding the dog in my arms as he marched me away. The world blurred around us, streaks of copper leaves flying by. The grass crunched underfoot as Arrah muttered to himself. My hand throbbed from where the dog had bitten it, but at least the little dog had stopped fighting. He hung limp and quiet in my arms. When we reached the creek, Arrah threw up. We hadn't eaten in 2 days, so only bile and spit came up, glistening like the rotten flesh clinging to my palm. Then he waded into the water. "Get in here, Sena. Wash it off. Wash that poor dead man off." I did as he said. I even brought the dog with me. He didn't even flinch when I jostled his injured leg. After we bathed, Ami showed up. Ami was small and pale, like the moon, and wore a blindfold that covered one of his eyes. He never took it off. When I asked why, he told me that I sees the future, and the future is too sad to see. "What are you doing here?" Arrah asked, looking annoyed. Arrah didn't like Ami much because Ami made him feel crazy, like the monster in the lightning-struck tree or the demon with the long neck. But Ami wasn't like those things. Ami was good. Ami said, "Sena's hurt, so is the dog. The bees can help." Arrah hated the bees too. He hated anything magical, bad magic, like the lightning-struck tree, or good magic, like Ami and the bees. But he hated seeing me hurt even more. "Go on, Sena. Don't be long." I followed Ami down the winding path to where the bees were. I slowed when I heard the deep, vibrating hum, like the world was about to shake apart. We entered their grove. The buzz was deafening, yet beautiful, like a deep, primal lullaby. There were a dozen hives, all dripping with honey, all taller than me, hanging on the trees. One massive bee drifted near, bigger than my hand. Her eyes shone like suns in the warm, copper light. Show her your bites, Ami instructed. The bee hovered over my wounds, inspecting them before flying to Ami. He bowed low and moved to the nearest hive. The bee watched as he scooped up handfuls of honey and spread it on my hands. This will heal the wounds and stop infection, Ami said. But this isn't just any honey. He wrapped the honey in leaves and tied it with grass before turning to the dog with his broken legs. Now, Sena, tell me why you smell of death. I told him about the dog and the dead man with no legs. The witch's cannibal son did that, Ami said, his voice calm. Almost too calm for the nightmare we just witnessed. He's hungry. Why doesn't she stop him? I asked, though the answer already clawed at my throat. She needs the bones of his victims to make her garden grow, and their eyes to see the future. I remembered the lightning-struck tree's whisper. Give me your eyes and I will show you things you never dreamed. She can't stop him anymore. The demons in the trees help him hunt. They feed on the pain of his victims. It makes them grow, makes them strong. She can't even stop him eating the men who come to her house for help. Why would anyone go to her house if she's got a man-eating son? I asked, shaking my head at the thought of it. To learn the future. All those eyes? She takes them, and with blood magic, turns them into crystal balls. Some show the future. Others you break open and drink what's inside to make your wish come true. She'll let you take any crystal ball you like if you pay her price with your blood. Only if her son takes a liking to you, he eats you, and she still keeps the price you paid. Wishes? The witch grants wishes. I asked, heart hammering as I thought of Arrah. His endless torment, his screams through the night, his skin screaming for relief. The poor boy who had suffered because of me, because of the curse I carried. Well, why doesn't someone go wish her son wasn't a cannibal? I'll do it. I tried to sound defiant, though I was already trembling inside. You'll do no such thing, Ami said firmly. If the witch or her son learn of your blood, they'll trap you forever and force you to work their wicked magic. But what if they don't? What if they grant me a wish instead? What if I wish to make Arrah better? They would never grant that wish, Ami replied, shaking his head. They're too evil. Everything about that witch, her house, her terrible garden, and her man-eating son, too evil for anything good to come of it. And you, my dear, you're too good, too bright. Just tell me where her house is. I pushed, desperate. Never. Go back to your brother with your dog. Touch no more dead things. Tell Arrah to move on. The cannibal son is prowling, and the slave catchers are near. I'll kill them if they try to catch me. I lied, trying to sound tougher than I felt. That's what we do to slavers. But the magic faded. The godlike feeling, the terror and comfort all mixed into one. Everything left me when Ami dismissed me, and I knew, deep down, that it was over. When I got back, Arrah was having one of his worst fits, the kind where he cried until blood coughed up from his lungs, tearing at his own skin. He stood in the cold creek, scrubbing himself until his nails were blue, his body shuddering with cold and pain like it was going to break. I sang to him, his favorite hymn, "What Wondrous Love Is This?" It helped, though it took a long time. 7 times I had to sing it, and finally the fits eased. Afterward, I whispered, "We can find somewhere to go, Arrah. There are abolitionist safe houses." No, his voice was quiet, but firm. No one's safe to you. Once they find out what you can do, you'll be a slave again. We stay out here, where no one can hurt you. But it's hurting you, I said, the tears thick in my throat. I don't care. His voice cracked, but he didn't soften. That made me cry.
I'm sorry.
Don't ever be sorry, he snapped, his voice fierce. They would have used you. They would have drank your blood, cut you into pieces, eaten you, just like the witch's son. I would have gone to hell if I'd let them do that. I would have killed myself first. I just want you to be happy. You're not.
I'm sorry.
I could hardly get the words out, the guilt squeezing my chest. I will never be sorry for anything I do for you. Don't you dare be sorry for it. His eyes burned with a fierce love I couldn't have understood if I hadn't seen it in him so many times before. Eventually, Arrah fell asleep. But as I lay there next to him, my thoughts kept turning over, haunted by the monsters that lived in the forest. Those demons, the witch, her son. They were all real. If they were real, so was the witch's power to grant wishes, and the price that came with it. I lay awake for hours, thinking of the tree, of the lightning, of the witch and her son. What could they do for me? What could they offer? Could they make Arrah better? Could they fix us? I drifted into a restless sleep as the sky began to lighten, haunted by a dream of an old plantation house, its shelves lined with glowing crystal balls. Behind them, two empty eyes, full of hunger, stared back at me. When I woke, Arrah was in worse shape than ever. He was crying, scrubbing the camp clean, muttering about how dirty everything was. I took over, forcing him to rest. After I had done what I could, I sat next to him, exhausted and racked with guilt. Then a deer passed by. "I want a cottage," Arrah said, his voice wistful, soft in a way I wasn't used to hearing. "A little cottage by a lake that freezes in the winter. A house with apple trees, where deer come to visit. Perfect little house where we'll be free, safe from slavers, safe from monsters. I'm gonna build it for us. That's our future, Sena. I promise." The words broke something inside me. Even in his dreams, Arrah couldn't stop worrying about me. But over the next few weeks, it only got worse. He scrubbed and cleaned, but nothing was ever clean enough for him. He washed the grass-stuffed bedrolls in the creek until they fell apart. His skin grew raw, his bones seemed to ache. And every night, he lay awake crying, convinced his skin was turning to bark, that he was turning into something monstrous. I sang his hymn again and again, holding him through the madness. One night, Arrah finally broke. He screamed, cried, scratched himself raw, and begged God to either help us or take us both. "Please help us," he cried. "Or just end it. Just end it all." "Go, Sena," Arrah screamed, his voice wild and desperate. "Get out. Get away from me. Run." Arrah had never told me to run before, and I knew deep down he meant it. I didn't want to leave him, but his fear made it clear. I had to. So I ran, though every step felt like it was tearing me apart. I ran without thinking, following no path but the raw instinct pulling me forward. That instinct led me straight to the lightning-struck tree, its gnarled, blackened branches twitching as if something monstrous was shifting inside. I froze. I always tried to avoid this thing, the monster that lived in the hollow. So why had I come here? "Hello, beautiful child," it whispered, its voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Have you come to give me your eyes?" "No," I whispered back, though the words didn't seem to carry any weight. "Then why have you come?" it asked, its voice a chilling rasp. And at that moment I knew why. Because it was magic. Bad magic, yes. But good magic had never helped me. The bees couldn't help Arrah. Ami wouldn't. And my own good magic had led to Arrah being trapped out here in the first place. If good magic couldn't help, then maybe it was time to ask the bad kind. "I need help for my brother," I said, the words feeling like a heavy prayer. "I can't help without eyes," the monster crooned, its voice thick with hunger. "Neither can I muttered, feeling its gaze prickling the back of my neck. The creature's spindly, taloned fingers crept out of the bore hole. "Well, I can't take eyes that keep watch over someone who needs watching. But I can't help without eyes. Bring me someone else's." "I can't. They might need theirs to watch their brothers too." "Then bring me my eyes." "Aren't they in your head?" I asked, my voice shaky.
No.
"The witch took them long ago. She keeps them in her house. They're green as a sunlit pond. Bring them back and I will help your brother." I swallowed hard. "How do I get to the witch's house?" "I don't know," it answered, its voice suddenly distant. "I can't see." With that, I turned and made my way back to Arrah. When I found him, he shrank away from me, as if terrified by the very sight of me. I knelt beside him and wrapped my arms around him, trying to comfort him despite my own overwhelming fear. I'm so tired, Sena. I want to die. Only I'm afraid of dying, and more afraid of leaving you. The words broke something deep inside me. Couldn't let him go. Arrah deserved a life of peace, of happiness, away from monsters and pain. A life where he could have a cottage by a lake, apple trees and deer, free from the terror that had plagued him since we ran away. I knew in that moment that I had to find the witch's house. Ami must have known what I was thinking, because he came to me as soon as I sang Arrah to sleep. You can't do this, he said, his voice soft with a kind of sorrow I didn't want to hear. I can't even help you. The witch, her son, and their garden are so evil. I can't come within a mile of them. If you go in, you'll never get out. You'll be all alone. Arrah was alone, and he got me out. I can get back out for him, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. What if her cannibal son eats you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He doesn't eat girls. He eats men. Oh, Sena, Ami said helplessly, tears soaking his blindfold, falling like stars. What will Arrah do without you? He'll be free, I said, though even as I spoke, I wasn't sure if I believed it. Ami's face crumpled, the tears rolling down like rivers of starlight. This is wrong. All of it. You've both been so wronged. No one but me is going to right it, I said, my resolve hardening. Where is the witch's house? He hesitated but then spoke, telling me of a hidden path marked by shattered crystal balls, broken remnants of wishes made and forgotten. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd step right over them. But if you did, the path was clear as water, shimmering in the moonlight. I hoped that my wish would one day join those pieces of glass, glinting in the dark. Please don't go, Sena, Ami whispered, his voice shaking. Is Arrah going to get better? You can see the future. Tell me. I pleaded, desperate for any hope. Ami lifted his blindfold, and there it was, something so pure, so full of love and grief, it nearly broke me. His moon-colored eye gleamed with tears, cascading down his face like starlight.
No.
The word hit me like a fist to the chest. And what happens if he doesn't get better? I asked, my voice breaking. Everything you're afraid of, Ami whispered. I felt the lump in my throat. Then I have to go. I'll make sure he stays asleep until I'm back. You have to sing again or he'll wake up soon, Ami said quietly. So I sat by Arrah, singing his favorite hymn until his troubled face softened and his body relaxed. By the end, he looked almost peaceful, as if he were well and free of the curse. For a moment, I dared to imagine that life. What could have been if everything had been different? Then I set off, my heart heavy but determined. The little dog, hesitant at first, followed. It made me smile. You want to help too? Then come on. For the first time ever, he wagged his tail and trotted after me. Ami had been right. Now that I knew what I was looking for, I saw the shattered crystal balls shimmering in the earth, marking the path like a trail of starlight. Together, the dog and I crossed the creek, the forest, the fields. We even evaded slave catchers who were drunk, so it was easy. The hardest part was keeping my dog quiet. Once they passed, we kept moving, following the sparkling shards across the river and deeper into the hills, the path glimmering in the moonlight. As the moon began to set, a house appeared on the horizon, stark and dark against the glowing sky. All the windows were alight. I followed the path, which was now covered in shards of crystal, shining like starlight. When I entered the garden, it was worse than I could have imagined. Twisted, decaying stalks reached toward the sky, their sickly blooms glinting unnaturally. It was like the bodies of the dead had been twisted into grotesque forms, neither alive nor dead, something foul and corrupted. I wanted to scream, to run, but the dog licked my hand, steadying me. With his quiet courage, I squared my shoulders and marched up the glowing path. When I reached the porch, the lights inside flickered, growing brighter, then dimming, as if the day itself had turned to dusk in the span of a breath. I tried the door, praying it was locked, but it creaked open with a dreadful sound. Inside, music played, twisted, rotten music. A version of What Wondrous Love Is This that sent chills through my body. I almost ran, but I couldn't. But then I thought of Arrah, and the weight of that thought pushed me forward. The entrance hall was a dark maze of open doors, each leading to a room that flickered with pale, blue light. Shadows stirred in those rooms, restless and alive in a way I didn't dare examine closely. I marched onward. The little dog padded silently by my side, stiff with alertness, his every step the picture of bravery. Despite the fear gnawing at me, I smiled. We entered a parlor, shelves lining one side and monsters lining the other. The stench hit me first. A wall of suffocating, foul air, so thick it took a moment before my mind realized it wasn't solid. It was just air, but corrupted air, the kind that twisted the very soul. I dared a glance at the monsters. Their bodies were a grotesque patchwork. Heads and chests from men, limbs from animals. Wolves, coyotes, pumas, bears. Someone had stitched these creatures together, tearing apart humans and beasts alike and fusing them into something wrong. Something that matched the corrupt air and the twisted music filling the room. I couldn't bear to look at their dead eyes, the slick, rotting flesh where decay had already begun to settle. So I turned away, and that's when I saw the shelves. Rows upon rows of crystal balls, broken into jagged lines, scattered like a gap-toothed grin. Most of them glistened faintly, the kind of dim glow you see in the eyes of the dead. I knew instinctively that these were empty, no future, no wishes inside. But a few of them glowed with fire, their light hot and fierce. One caught my eye more than the others. Its glow like a coppery winter sunset, warm and strange. I was drawn to it. Others were moon-colored, beautiful, but too close to the pale, dead light of the others. One shone like the sun, and I knew that if I touched it, it would burn. And then there were two at the very end, green as pond water in summer. I slipped them into my pocket. Those don't belong to you. The voice came from the shadows, cold and deadly. My heart skipped a beat. There she was, sitting in a chair against the moonlit window, her form shrouded in darkness. My dog growled and stepped in front of me, his hackles raised. They don't belong to you either. The laughter that followed was horrible, slithering worm-like, winding its way through the air and mingling with the rotten music. They belong to my friend, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You stole them. What a good friend, the voice replied, dripping with mockery. Sending a tiny girl into the monster's den. The little dog growled again, but I was too scared to even move. You came for your brother, your big brother, your sick, mad brother who wants to die and will. You want to wish him better. Yes? I whispered, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. The wishes are gone. I wasted them all on my son. There is only the future now, one that no one wants to see. Yours is darker than mine. You're lying, I said, though the words felt weak, desperate. Why would I lie? She replied, her voice like nails on stone. Because you're a witch. The room fell silent. Then her laughter returned, more awful than before. I wish I were a witch. I'd have magic. I'd have power. I have nothing. Take your friend's eyes. Take your future. Learn to live in darkness. I scanned the shelves again. All that dim, dead light broken here and there by sparks of fire. Take them now, she continued, her voice a quiet threat. Before my son smells you and your beautiful brother. He'll know what you are. You won't leave alive. Neither will your dog. He got away once. He won't get away again. I reached for the coppery crystal ball, the one that looked like a winter sunset over a frozen lake. Don't have to break it open, she said, her voice suddenly too sweet. It's such a pretty thing. The only pretty thing you'll ever have. Why ruin it when I can tell you what it says? It says you can't help your brother. He's done. He's been done since before either of you were born. Her words cut deep. I knew, deep in my bones, that she was telling the truth. And that truth, more than any fear, drove me to run. Out of the parlor, down the hall, past the flickering lights and the hideous garden, with the twisted him chasing me into the night. I reached the lightning-struck tree just before dawn. The creature was waiting for me, its long, spindly fingers tapping impatiently. I dug into my pocket and pulled out the green orbs, placing them in its narrow palm. You did it? It breathed, its voice thick with satisfaction. The hand retreated into the darkness, and I heard wet, clacking sounds as something slithered away. Then, a pale face appeared. A smiling face, beautiful in a way that made my heart stop. It was a woman's face, fine-featured, heart-shaped, with eyes that were green as a sunlit pond. "Let's help your brother," she said, her voice like the sound of rain. We reached the creek at dawn. Arrah was still asleep, his breathing steady. Ami sat beside him, his tears still streaking down his face like stars in the quiet of the early morning. The woman from the lightning tree crawled to Arrah, her movements slow and deliberate. I held my breath, my heart breaking in my chest. But when she reached him, her smile faded. I wasn't surprised. The witch had told me the truth. I'd known it in my heart and every other part of me. She looked at me with those sunlit eyes, and I knew, before she spoke, what she would say. "I can't help you. His fate was written before time began. So was yours." "What are those fates?" I whispered, my voice thick with tears. Her eyes softened, and her voice was hypnotic, like the lure of a river. "He rots before winter. You die before spring. You were both dead before you were born." And then, with a final glance, she slithered away. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I didn't. If I cried, I'd wake Arrah. And for what? To admit I'd failed? That I was not just his curse, but his death too? I walked to Arrah, gripping the coppery crystal ball so tightly I thought my knuckles might break. I took deep breaths. Deep, shuddering breaths to swallow the sobs rising inside me. But they came anyway, flooding up and spilling over. "It's my fault," I sobbed, my voice breaking. "He ran away because of me. Now he's going to die because of me." Ami said nothing, but his face spoke volumes. Sadness, understanding, and something else, something I couldn't name. "Maybe not. Maybe," he said softly, but his expression told me everything I needed to know. "It's true," I whispered. Not because I was trying to be quiet, but because the truth hurt too much to shout. "Everything they said is true." Ami's gaze was unwavering. "It's the truth, but only half. The other half of the truth is this. Where there's a shadow, there's light. The other side of despair is joy. And at the very end of all things, every shadow in the witch's truth, every bit of your pain and suffering and hopelessness will transform into something so beautiful that it will all be worth it. I promise. It will be worth it." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. I smashed the coppery crystal ball on the ground, then buried my face in my hands and wept. Arrah slept through it all. When he finally woke, he looked more tired than ever. After we ate our fill of wild berries, Ami grew still. "What's wrong?" Arrah asked, his voice tinged with concern. For the third time, Ami raised his blindfold. "A shadow smells you, Sena. A hungry shadow, thick with blood. It's the witch's son. You need to go, Arrah. You have to take her and run." Arrah didn't hesitate. He grabbed me, and with the little dog in tow, we ran. We ran for what felt like forever, through day and night, until we found a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient tree. Arrah tucked me inside, then stayed out to keep watch. I slept, though my dreams were haunted. I dreamt of the lightning-struck tree. Only this time I was inside it, blind, consumed with rage. I grinned like a mad woman as the scent of a young child drifted on the wind. When I woke, Arrah was mumbling in his sleep, tears slipping down his cheeks. I sang to him the words from the song heavy with guilt. When I reached the line, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul. It hit me. I was Arrah's curse. He bore that curse on his soul. And for what? For what? I kept singing, hoping it would comfort him. It did. The song soothed him, and he fell back into a restless sleep. I tried to keep watch, but exhaustion took me too. Sleep claimed me quickly, and with it came a nightmare that wasn't a nightmare at all. I knew it was real, as surely as I knew the witch had spoken the truth. In the dream that wasn't a dream, Arrah stood before a man with a bloody mouth and hollow, flat eyes. The man's grin stretched impossibly wide, and I saw his teeth, sharp, jagged, and a dead heart, glistening and pulsing inside his mouth. That heart was the same color as the dead, milky crystal balls. "My mother told me you came," the man rasped, his voice a guttural whisper. "But she didn't have to. I smelled you and your beautiful brother. I took him, but I couldn't take you. He made it so I couldn't see you or smell you, so you have to come to him on your own. When I let you wake, come and save him, just like he'd save you." I woke, screaming. The sky outside was dark, the moon bright above. Arrah was gone. So was my dog. The ground around me sparkled faintly with broken crystal, shards embedded in the earth. These weren't milky white, though. They were the color of a winter sunset on a frozen lake. I don't know if the witch's son laid that path, or if I did. All I know is that I followed it, through the fields and the forest, back to the creek. There was no sign of Arrah, but there was our little dog, panting in the moonlight. I picked him up and kept moving. Dawn came, and with it, the sun rose cold and sharp. Time slipped away as I walked. Morning bled into afternoon, and the daylight grew deeper, colder. As the sun sank low, the witch's house appeared on its hill, dark and looming. I left the dog by the garden gate, whispering, "You wait here. If I'm not back by midnight, or if the witch's cannibal son comes, you run. Run and find a family, a good one, and forget about Arrah and me." I passed under the gate, then walked up the path, no longer bathed in milky light, but instead in the pure, fiery copper glow of my chosen future. The future that gave me the strength to keep going. I entered the house, down the familiar hallway. The doors were open, but the rooms were empty.
No flickering lights, no shifting shadows.
But the stench was unbearable, thick as a wall, suffocating. It was the same foul smell that haunted my memories. Nothing would stop me. I was prepared to fight for Arrah, no matter the cost. I entered the parlor, and there he was. My brother, my Arrah, but not as he should be. Parts of him were there. His head, with a wolf's snout sewn onto his face. His chest, attached to the arms of a bear. His hips, stitched to the haunches of a mountain lion. And on his back, 6 great black wings, drooping and glossy, their dark feathers catching the copper light, reflecting the sunset. The color of our future. I collapsed to my knees, staring into his dull, milky eyes. They were like the dead things, glistening but hollow. I didn't move, not even when my dog nudged my hand with his wet nose and whined. Not when he nipped at my heels. Not when footsteps echoed in the hallway behind me. Not when those footsteps stopped behind me. Not when strong hands gripped my arms and pulled me roughly to my feet. Not when those hands spun me around to face the man from my nightmare. The witch's cannibal son at last. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice cold and cruel. "For both of you, since before any of us were born." Then, with a sharp motion, he sliced across both of my palms, the pain searing through me. He led me to my brother. No, I wanted to scream. No more corruption. No more curses. But I was too small, too frightened to stop him. He smeared my blood, hot and red, across Arrah's face, his shoulders, his haunches, and each of his glossy black wings, the color of the sunset. My blood dripped down him in tiny rivers, pattering to the floor like teardrops. When I could no longer stand, I sank to my knees, my heart breaking, and I began to sing Arrah's hymn. I didn't stop when the witch's cannibal son laughed. I didn't stop when he knelt before the corrupted monstrosity he'd created from my brother. I didn't stop when Arrah's new body shuddered to life. I didn't stop when his wings spread wide, casting great, dark shadows over me. I didn't stop when he tore off the witch's son's head. But I did stop when he roared at me. His eyes, one his own, familiar and dark, the other molten copper, glared at me, full of nothing but hate and hunger. I waited for him to tear my head off, too. He roared again, so loud it split my skull and made my ears ring, then ran. I wanted to follow, but my blood kept dripping. I was afraid it would touch the monsters lined up on the wall. More than that, I feared it would touch the witch's son, even in death. I was too tired to think anymore. I curled up in a corner and fell asleep. I woke alone, my hands bandaged. I can't say for sure, but I think the witch did that before her end. Upstairs, I found her, far from the blood I'd spilled, holding her son's headless body. Exhausted, lightheaded, I stumbled out of the house with my little dog in tow. The garden was no longer monstrous. It was just dead and tired. There was no path now, no milky white, no copper glow, nothing. I stumbled into the forest. I don't even know what I planned to do. But when I reached the trees, I opened my mouth and began to sing my brother's hymn. Nothing. I started again. By the end of the first chorus, something shifted in the trees. My voice broke into a shriek. But I kept singing anyway. To God and to the Lamb. There, a single fiery eye burning in the shadowed trees, like an ember. I will sing, I will sing. He crouched low, slithering forward. To God and to the Lamb, I will sing. No longer slithering, he prowled, his body low to the ground, moving with the jarring, graceful speed of a mountain lion. To God and to the Lamb, who is the great I Am. My shrieking dissolved into sobs as he drew closer, so close, too close. While millions join the theme, I will sing, I will sing. He rose to his full height, his wings blocking the stars. While millions join the theme, he reached out, a great monstrous arm, and I thought he would tear my head off. Terror and relief flooded through me. I would be gone, no longer a curse. He would be free, truly free. But instead, he pulled me in, crushing me against him. Not to kill me, but to hug me. I have never wept like I did then, and I will never weep like that again. After the weeping, we slept a long time. When we woke, Ami came, exclaiming over how beautiful Arrah was, how powerful, how magnificent his wings were. He was strong now, stronger than anything could hurt him. And because nothing could hurt him, nothing could hurt me. We hurt other people. They deserved it. They were just slavers, as Arrah put it. That's what we do to slavers. I was happy when you found me. I believed you when you said we would be safe. You didn't lie, not exactly. But Arrah and I ran to keep them from draining my blood and using it for themselves. We went through it all only to end up back where we started. I hear things I shouldn't. That's how I know you're trying so hard. You're trying to do good all the time. You do good a lot of the time. But not for me. You take the good I make and give it to everyone else. That's what Arrah said last time you let me see him. You know what else he said? He said, "That's what slavers do, Sena. They're just slavers. And you know what we do to slavers?